The rancher lived on the far edge of the valley, where the road slowly turned into dirt, and most people stopped going any farther. His house was old, built from faded wood that had seen many summers and winters. The paint on the walls had chipped away, and the porch steps creaked with every step. Inside, the house was clean but empty, filled with silence instead of voices. He had lived alone for many years, ever since life had taken away the people he once shared his days with. Every morning, he woke up before the sun. He made a simple breakfast, usually the same thing every day, and drank his coffee while looking out at the open land. The ranch was not large, but it required constant work. There were fences to check, animals to feed, and repairs that never seemed to end. His hands were rough from years of labor, and his back often ached, but he never complained. Work kept his mind busy, and that helped him avoid thinking about how lonely his life had become. The nearby town was small, and people there knew him only by sight. They saw him come in once or twice a month to buy supplies. He rarely spoke more than a few words. Some thought he was unfriendly. Others simply didn't care enough to learn his story. Over time, he became invisible to them. Just another quiet old man passing through with dust on his boots and tired eyes. Despite his silence, the rancher noticed everything. He noticed how people rushed through their days without looking around. He noticed who struggled and who was ignored. He understood hardship better than most, even though he never spoke about it. Life had taught him lessons that words could not explain. One afternoon, the rancher drove into town earlier than usual. A fence had broken during the night, and he needed tools to fix it before the animals wandered off. The sky was gray, and the air felt heavy, as if rain might fall at any moment. The town was busy that day, with people moving in and out of shops, focused on their own needs. As he parked his old truck near the general store, he noticed a woman sitting on the sidewalk close to the entrance. She looked tired, her clothes worn, and her posture weak, as if life had slowly pressed her down over time. Her hair was pulled back in a loose way, and her face showed signs of worry and long nights without rest. In her hands, she held a small piece of cardboard with a few simple words written on it, asking for help. People walked past her without stopping. Some didn't even look in her direction. Others glanced at her for a moment and quickly turned away. Pretending not to notice, the rancher stood still for a moment, watching the scene unfold. He saw how easily she was ignored, how quickly people decided she was not worth their time. He walked into the store, picked up what he needed, and went to pay. As he reached into his pocket, he felt the familiar worry of counting his money. Life on the ranch didn't leave much extra. After paying for his supplies, he checked his pocket again and realized he had only $1 left. For a moment, he hesitated. That dollar could buy him a small coffee or help cover fuel for the drive back. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. He stood quietly, thinking, while the noise of the store faded into the background. When he stepped back outside, the woman was still there. Her eyes met his for just a second, then dropped to the ground. She had likely seen many people look at her the same way briefly. Without hope, the rancher walked closer and stopped in front of her. He didn't rush. He didn't act nervous. He simply reached into his pocket and handed her the $1. It was a small action, but he did it with care, as if it mattered. She looked up at him, surprised, and whispered a soft thank you. Her voice shook, not just from hunger or cold, but from the simple fact that someone had noticed her. Instead of walking away, the rancher stayed. He asked her how she was doing, his voice calm and gentle. At first, she seemed unsure, as if she expected him to leave like everyone else. But something in his eyes made her feel safe enough to speak. She told him a little about herself. Not everything, just enough to explain how she had ended up there. Life had not gone as planned. A series of bad decisions, broken trust, and sudden losses had pushed her to the edge. She had tried to find work, tried to start again, but each door seemed to close before she could step through it. The rancher listened without interrupting. He didn't judge her words or rush her story. He understood that sometimes people didn't need advice, they just needed someone to hear them. As she spoke, the noise of the town continued around them. But for a moment, it felt like the world had slowed down. He nodded quietly, acknowledging her pain without trying to fix it. When she finished speaking, there was an awkward pause. She seemed embarrassed, as if she had said too much, but the rancher didn't look away. He told her he had once been in a place where life felt empty and unfair. He didn't go into details. He didn't need to. His tone carried the weight of experience. She could tell he wasn't pretending. After a moment, he asked her a simple question, whether she was hungry. She nodded slowly. Without saying much more, he went back into the store and returned with food. He handed it to her and watched as she accepted it with grateful hands. People passing by noticed them now. Some whispered, others stared. They wondered why an old rancher would stop and spend time with someone like her. The rancher didn't seem to care. He was focused only on the woman in front of him. As he prepared to leave, he paused again. He looked toward the distant hills where his ranch sat quietly, waiting. An idea formed in his mind, one that surprised even him. He had gone to town for tools, but he was leaving with something heavier on his heart. He told her he might have more than just money to offer. His words were careful, not rushed. He mentioned his ranch, the work that needed to be done, and how quiet the place had become. He didn't promise anything. He simply gave her the chance to consider something different. The woman looked at him, unsure what to say. Hope and fear mixed in her eyes. No one had offered her an opportunity in a long time. Only quick glances and empty sympathy. She didn't answer right away. The rancher gave her time. He told her she didn't need to decide now. Then he turned and walked toward his truck, leaving her with more than $1. He left her with a choice, something that had been missing from her life for a very long time. As he drove away, the town continued as it always did, unaware that something important had just begun. The rancher returned to his quiet land. But for the first time in years, the silence felt different. It no longer felt empty. It felt like the beginning of change. The woman stayed sitting on the sidewalk long after the rancher drove away. His old truck disappeared down the road, leaving behind the sound of traffic and footsteps. She held the food in her hands, still warm, and stared at it as if it might vanish. Many people had given her small things before, but this felt different. It wasn't just the food or the $1. It was the way he had looked at her, like she was a person and not a problem. Her mind replayed his words again and again. A ranch. Work. A quiet place. She had heard promises before, and most of them had led nowhere. Trust had become difficult for her. Life had taught her to protect herself, even from hope. Still, something about his calm voice stayed with her. He had not rushed her. He had not pushed. He had simply offered a choice. As the afternoon passed, clouds rolled in, and the air grew cooler. People continued to walk by, but she felt less invisible than before. She ate slowly, savoring each bite. It gave her strength, not just in her body but in her thoughts. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine a different tomorrow. That night, she found a place to rest near an old building where she sometimes slept. The ground was hard, and the sounds of the town never fully stopped, but her mind was busy. She wondered what kind of man the rancher really was. Why would someone with so little give away what he had? Why would he offer work to a stranger? Sleep came in short pieces. Each time she woke, the same questions returned. By morning, she knew she couldn't ignore the feeling in her chest. Even if it led to nothing, she needed to try. Doing nothing had kept her stuck for too long. The next day, she cleaned herself as best she could at a public place and fixed her hair. She wanted to look ready. Not perfect, just ready. She asked around town until someone pointed her toward the dirt road that led out to the valley. It was a long walk, and with each step, doubt grew heavier. Turning back would be easy. Moving forward took effort. The road stretched wide and empty. Fields opened on both sides, and the noise of the town faded behind her. Her feet ached, and the bag she carried felt heavier with every mile. More than once, she stopped and considered sitting down and giving up. But then she remembered the rancher's eyes, steady and kind, and she kept going. Hours later, she reached the ranch. The land looked worn but alive. Fences leaned but still stood. Animals moved slowly in the distance. The house, though old, looked cared for. She stood at the edge of the property, unsure how to announce herself. Fear crept in. What if he had changed his mind? What if this was a mistake? Before she could decide, the rancher appeared, carrying a bucket. He froze when he saw her, surprise crossing his face. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he nodded, as if he had been expecting her all along. She explained why she had come, her words careful and honest. She told him she didn't expect anything for free. She just wanted a chance to work and prove herself. He listened the same way he had in town, without rushing or judging. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he asked her if she was tired. When she nodded, he pointed toward the house and told her to sit and rest. He brought her water and some simple food. There were no big speeches, no promises, just small actions that showed respect. Later that day, he showed her around the ranch. He explained the work slowly, knowing she had never done this kind of labor before. He didn't push her too hard. He watched quietly as she tried, stumbled, and tried again. She surprised herself by how willing she was to learn. Each task, no matter how small, made her feel useful. The rancher noticed her effort. He saw how she stayed focused, how she didn't complain, even when the work was tough. In the evenings, they ate in silence most of the time. But it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It felt safe. Word began to spread back in town. People talked about the woman who had left the sidewalk and gone to live on a ranch with a lonely man. Some shook their heads. Others assumed the worst. Very few believed anything good could come from it. The rancher heard the rumors when he went to town for supplies. He didn't respond. He had lived long enough to know that people often spoke without understanding. What mattered was what he saw with his own eyes. Days turned into weeks. The woman grew stronger, both in body and spirit. She woke early, worked hard, and learned quickly. The ranch slowly began to change. Fences were repaired, animals were healthier. Even the house felt warmer, filled with quiet movement instead of stillness. The rancher also changed. He found himself talking more, explaining things, even smiling at times. He hadn't realized how much he missed sharing space with another person. The loneliness that once sat heavy on his chest began to loosen its grip. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, they sat on the porch, tired but calm. The woman thanked him for giving her a chance. He shrugged, as if it were nothing. But his eyes said otherwise. He told her that sometimes helping someone else helped you find yourself again. Neither of them knew what the future would bring. They only knew that something important had begun, with one small decision. The town might still judge. Life might still bring challenges, but on that quiet ranch, two broken paths had crossed, and for the first time in a long while, both of them were moving forward. Life on the ranch settled into a steady rhythm. Each morning began before sunrise, when the sky was still soft and gray, and the air felt cool and fresh. The woman woke to the sounds of animals and the quiet movement of the land. At first, her body struggled with the early hours and the physical work, but she pushed herself to keep going. She told herself every day that this chance mattered, and she refused to waste it. The rancher showed her more responsibility as time passed. He taught her how to care for the animals, how to spot problems before they grew bigger, and how to fix small things around the property. His teaching style was patient. He didn't raise his voice or make her feel small when she made mistakes. Instead, he let her learn by doing, stepping in only when necessary. That kindness made her want to do even better. Slowly, the ranch began to look different. The land that once felt tired now showed signs of life. Fresh repairs appeared on fences, tools were cleaned and returned to their places. The animals responded to the care, moving with more energy and trust. Even neighbors passing by noticed the change. Some stopped to watch from a distance, curious about what was happening. The woman found comfort in the work. Her hands, once shaky with worry, grew strong and steady. Each completed task gave her a sense of pride she hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long while, she felt useful, needed, and respected. That feeling was worth more than any amount of money. Evenings were quiet but meaningful. After long days, they often sat outside, watching the sun lower behind the hills. Sometimes they spoke about the work or plans for the next day. Other times, they sat in silence, letting the peace of the land speak for them. The silence no longer felt empty. It felt shared. One evening, as they rested, the woman opened up about her past. She spoke slowly, choosing her words with care. She shared how life had once been full of hope, how she had trusted people who did not protect her, and how one bad turn had led to another. She talked about the shame she carried, and the fear of never being seen as more than her mistakes. The rancher listened without looking away. When she finished, he nodded gently. He told her that many people carried pain they never talked about. He shared a small piece of his own story, how loss had taught him to live quietly, how loneliness had crept in without him noticing. He didn't blame anyone. He spoke with acceptance, as if he had made peace with the past. That conversation changed something between them. Trust grew stronger. They understood each other better, not through words alone but through shared experience. They were two people who had been worn down by life but were still standing. In town, talk continued. Some people believed the woman was taking advantage of the rancher. Others thought he was foolish to trust her. A few even claimed it wouldn't last. The rancher heard these things and chose to ignore them. He had learned long ago that opinions often said more about the speaker than the truth. The woman felt the weight of those judgments when she went into town with him. She noticed the looks and the whispers. At first, they hurt. But then she remembered where she had been and where she was now. She stood a little taller and focused on her work. She didn't need their approval. One afternoon, a sudden storm swept through the valley. Strong winds and heavy rain damaged part of the ranch. A section of fencing collapsed, and some animals wandered too close to the road. The rancher and the woman worked together quickly, moving through the rain, guiding the animals back to safety, and doing what they could to limit the damage. By the time the storm passed, they were exhausted, cold, and covered in mud. But the animals were safe, and the ranch had survived. As they stood there, catching their breath, the rancher realized something important. He could not have managed this alone anymore. The ranch depended on her as much as she depended on it. That night, he thanked her sincerely. His words were simple, but they carried meaning. He told her she was no longer just helping out. She was part of the ranch. The woman felt a rush of emotion she hadn't expected. For so long, she had felt temporary, like she didn't belong anywhere. Now, someone was telling her she mattered. The seasons began to change. The air grew cooler, and the days shortened. With each passing week, the bond between them deepened. There was no rush, no pressure, just mutual respect and shared purpose. The rancher noticed how his own outlook had shifted. He woke each day with more energy. He laughed more easily. The land no longer felt like a burden, but like a shared responsibility. He realized that the act of giving had returned something to him that he thought was gone forever. The woman, too, changed in ways she hadn't expected. Her confidence grew. She started making plans, small ones at first, about the future. She talked about learning more skills, about standing fully on her own one day. The rancher supported her ideas, knowing that true help meant encouraging independence, not control. One evening, as the stars filled the sky, the woman asked him why he had stopped for her that day in town. He thought for a long moment, before answering. He told her that once, long ago, someone had helped him when he had nothing to offer in return. That moment had stayed with him all his life. He said kindness had a way of coming back, often in unexpected forms. The woman listened quietly, understanding that his choice had not been random. It had been rooted in experience and empathy. As they sat there, the ranch peaceful around them. Neither of them knew how far their story would go, but they both knew one thing for sure. The small act that had begun with $1 had grown into something much larger. Something that was quietly changing not just their lives, but the meaning of kindness itself. The colder months arrived slowly, bringing crisp mornings and longer nights. The ranch looked different under the pale winter light, but the work did not stop. There was always something that needed care, and both of them stayed busy. The woman had now learned the routines so well that she often started tasks before the rancher even mentioned them. This quiet teamwork made life easier for both of them. The rancher began trusting her with more important responsibilities. He asked for her opinion when making decisions about repairs and supplies. At first, she was surprised. No one had asked her opinion in a long time. She worried about saying the wrong thing, but he listened carefully, treating her thoughts with respect. Slowly, she began to believe in her own judgment again. Their daily conversations grew more natural. They talked about simple things, like the weather or the animals, and sometimes about deeper thoughts. They never rushed these moments. There was no need. Time on the ranch moved at its own pace, and they followed it. One afternoon, the rancher received a visit from an old neighbor. The man looked around, noticing the changes, the repaired fences, the healthier animals, the cleaner land. He asked questions, clearly surprised. The rancher answered calmly and introduced the woman as someone who worked with him on the ranch. The word "with" mattered. It showed partnership, not charity. After the neighbor left, the woman worried. She asked the rancher if her presence caused trouble. He shook his head and told her that people often needed time to understand change. He reminded her that doing the right thing didn't always come with immediate approval. His confidence gave her strength. In town, opinions slowly began to shift. People noticed the ranch improving. Some who had doubted her before now spoke more carefully. A few even smiled at her when she came into the store. These small changes meant a lot to her, though she tried not to depend on them. She had learned that true worth came from within. The rancher faced his own challenges. Age made some tasks harder, and there were days when his body felt heavy with exhaustion. During those times, the woman stepped in, without being asked. She adjusted the workload, took on more tasks, and made sure he rested. Her care was quiet but steady. One evening, after a long day, the rancher admitted something he had never said aloud before. He told her he had once considered leaving the ranch behind. The loneliness and pressure had become too much. He said that if she hadn't appeared when she did, he might have walked away from everything he had built. The woman listened, deeply moved. She realized how close both of them had come to losing their sense of purpose. Life had brought them together at just the right moment. That understanding made their bond stronger. As winter deepened, they worked together to prepare for harsh weather. They stored supplies, reinforced shelters, and planned carefully. These shared efforts built trust. Each challenge they faced together proved they were stronger as a team. One morning, the woman received a letter from someone from her past. It reminded her of a life she had almost forgotten. The letter brought mixed emotions, sadness, regret, and a reminder of how far she had fallen. For a moment, fear returned. She worried that her past would catch up with her and destroy the life she was rebuilding. She showed the letter to the rancher, her hands shaking. She expected judgment or disappointment. Instead, he read it quietly and handed it back. He told her that everyone had a past, but not everyone chose to grow beyond it. He said what mattered was who she was now. Those words lifted a heavy weight from her heart. She realized she no longer had to run from her past. She could face it with honesty and strength. As weeks passed, the ranch became more than just a place to work. It became a symbol of second chances. The woman began saving small amounts of money from her work. She talked about learning more skills and one day standing fully on her own. The rancher encouraged her. Even though the thought of her leaving someday made him uneasy, he understood that real kindness didn't mean holding someone back. It meant helping them grow, even if it led them away. This realization wasn't easy, but he accepted it with quiet wisdom. One evening, they sat together watching snow fall softly across the land. The world felt peaceful, almost still. The woman thanked him again for believing in her when no one else did. He smiled gently and said that believing in her had helped him believe in life again. Neither of them knew what the future would hold. Change was always waiting, just beyond the horizon. But they had learned something important together. Kindness given freely had the power to heal deep wounds, rebuild broken paths, and turn loneliness into shared strength. As the fire crackled inside the house and the cold wind moved across the land, both of them felt ready for whatever came next. The ranch stood strong against the winter, just like the two lives that had been quietly rebuilt within its fences. Spring arrived gently, almost quietly, as if it didn't want to disturb the peace the ranch had found. Snow melted into the soil, and the land slowly woke up again. Fresh green shoots appeared, and the animals moved with new energy. The change in the season felt like a reflection of the changes that had already taken place in the lives of the rancher and the woman. The woman now moved across the ranch with confidence. Her steps were steady, and her eyes no longer carried constant fear. She knew the land, the animals, and the work. More importantly, she knew herself better. The person who once sat on a sidewalk asking for help felt like a distant memory, though she never forgot that version of herself. Remembering where she came from helped her stay grounded. The rancher watched her with quiet pride. He rarely spoke about emotions, but his actions showed everything. He trusted her fully now. When decisions needed to be made, they made them together. The ranch no longer felt like a lonely responsibility resting on one man's shoulders. It felt like a shared life. As spring work increased, they spent long days preparing the land. They repaired what winter had damaged and planned for the months ahead. Neighbors began stopping by more often, sometimes to ask questions, sometimes to offer help. The ranch's transformation had become impossible to ignore. One afternoon, a group from town arrived unexpectedly. They had heard rumors for months and finally wanted to see the truth for themselves. They expected to find something strange or wrong. Instead, they saw a working ranch filled with order, care, and quiet harmony. They noticed the woman working confidently beside the rancher, giving instructions, solving problems, and treating everyone with respect. The shock on their faces was clear. This was not the story they had imagined. The rancher didn't explain himself. He didn't need to. The ranch spoke for itself. The land, the animals, and the calm strength of the woman standing beside him told a story stronger than words. Over time, the whispers in town changed. Judgment slowly turned into respect. Some people even began asking the woman for advice or offering her small jobs in town. She accepted politely but stayed focused on her goals. She was grateful, but she no longer needed approval to feel whole. One evening, as they sat outside watching the sky turn gold, the woman shared something important. She told the rancher she was thinking about the future in a new way. She wanted to take a step forward on her own someday. Maybe start something small using the skills she had learned. Saying it out loud made her nervous, but she felt ready. The rancher listened quietly. Inside, his heart felt heavy, but he didn't let it show. He had known this moment would come. He told her he was proud of her and that she deserved to build whatever future she dreamed of. His voice was steady, even though the idea of change was difficult. Weeks later, an opportunity came. A nearby property owner needed help managing land and animals and offered fair pay and a small place to live. It was a real chance for independence. The woman struggled with the decision. Leaving the ranch felt like leaving home, but she also knew that growth sometimes meant moving forward, even when it hurt. She talked with the rancher late into the night. They didn't rush the conversation. They spoke honestly, without fear. In the end, he told her something she would never forget. He said that the purpose of kindness was not to keep people close, but to help them stand strong on their own. The day she left was quiet. There were no crowds, no big speeches. She packed her few belongings and stood on the porch, looking at the place that had saved her life. Tears filled her eyes, but her smile was real. She thanked the rancher one last time, not just for the work or the shelter, but for seeing her when the world had looked away. He nodded and told her she had done the hard work herself. He reminded her that the ranch would always be a place she could return to. As her ride disappeared down the road, the rancher stood still for a long time. The silence returned, but it felt different now. It was no longer empty. It was peaceful. Months passed. The ranch continued to do well. The rancher stayed busy, but he was no longer lonely in the way he once had been. Letters arrived from the woman now and then, telling him about her progress, her challenges, and her victories. Each letter made him smile. In town, people often spoke about the story that had shocked them all. Not because of money, but because of the outcome. A single dollar, given with respect, had changed 2 lives. People began to see kindness differently. Some even started helping others in small, quiet ways. One afternoon, the woman returned to visit. She looked stronger, happier, and full of life. They walked the ranch together, talking and laughing like old friends. Nothing had been lost. Something better had been gained. As the sun set over the land, the rancher realized something powerful. That small decision he made in town had not just helped someone else. It had brought meaning back into his own life. He had learned that even the smallest act, when done with honesty and care, could create ripples far beyond what anyone expected. The ranch stood quietly under the evening sky, a reminder that true change doesn't come from wealth or power. It comes from seeing another human being, offering dignity, and choosing compassion one simple moment at a time.